We are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me today, the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, bud?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. It feels like the first real significant show. We were here last week, and we were talking about the season opener, and et cetera, but we're sitting here 1 week further along, October 24th as we record, and there's actual, real, tangible hockey to talk about. It's obviously a little too early to talk about sample sizes, but we at least have a couple more games under our belt. It's a pretty good week to be a Flyers fan, huh?
It's kind of an in-between sort of thing. Like, I think that there's room. It's room for your typical October. There's room to be skeptical. There's room to be excited. There were positives. There were negatives. There were good results. There were games that they probably could have possibly won that they didn't. It's better than talking about just one. I'll say that. It's also
Absolutely.
It's also only four, so
right. We
can't go too insane here. And you know what? I think that when we look at this week in general, it's exactly what I was trying to say a couple weeks ago. It's if you thought look, I'm not sitting here saying it wouldn't be nice if they came out of the gate with a big win streak. Of course it would, but I kind of said it could be in October. That's a bit of a mixed bag because
bit of a slow start.
And I don't think it's a slow start yet necessarily.
No, absolutely not based on the results.
You're 4 games in. You could have 8 points. You have 5. That's not a bad thing. If nothing else, and we'll go through each game.
Yeah, we're going to go game by game here.
I think that when you look at the end of the week and the way that Saturday goes, you at least like the attitude coming out of it, because the fact that I don't know about everybody else, but if your captain turns around and says, well, it was there, and a win and a loss in that particular game is the difference between a great homestand and a just okay one.
Yeah, if they win that game and get 7 points on the homestand, we're pretty happy here.
Well, especially when you considered where we were last Sunday talking about it, right? Like when we came on and did the show last week, we're sitting here talking about a game where we're like, well, take the point, because that's you didn't have any reason to get one, so yep. And to consider that they were 3 minutes away from nothing in that first game to, well, they got a point out of it, and then as the week progressed, you're talking,
Yep.
1 game win, second game win, third game right there going to the third period.
Totally.
Very competitive, very much. I didn't see, to be honest, the negatives are very easy to point out from a game like that, and it mostly had to do with discipline. It mostly had to do with a couple of turnovers against a team that's all about transition.
Yeah, we'll talk about Nick Seeler later on.
That's not even the worst one.
I know, but there were a couple pretty bad ones. But
that might be the one that actually you could have looked at and gone, geez, you're really overcalling stuff like that. Doesn't get called most of the time.
Well, the officiating in Saturday night was challenging because there was one ref on the ice for most of the game.
I don't know if you realize this. Now, that I put a little bit of an emphasis on who the officials are for a game, and sometimes go into it to, like, if we see this. That was an NHL referee who had all of 39 career games to his credit. One of the linesmen was making his NHL debut. So you lost your veteran guy because
when you lose the senior official,
the official who left was Gord Dwyer.
Yeah.
And you lose. So not only do you lose the veteran official, but you lose the guy who is going to take half of the ice for you, or who should take half of the ice. So he's going to make calls. This other guy is going to make calls from 100
poor angles,
if he has to.
And we saw that a couple times.
And for what it's worth, the guy's stats, by the way, because Scouting the Refs does a great job with stuff like this. He's like third in the league in most penalties called per game, or something.
Oh, so it was already going to just be.
He's already a guy who calls a lot. And now he's doing it by himself. So there were, what was the grand total? 11 penalties in the game?
It was a lot. It might have been more than that. But
I think it was 11, because it was 7. Florida had 7 power plays, and the Flyers ended up with 4.
Okay.
And some of them were not full on
shortened
deals, but it was,
Well, that's Saturday night.
Right. It's rough for game flow. Let's just put it that way.
But before Saturday night, let's start at the beginning of the week.
Oh, here we go.
Because we talked about it last week, and on Monday evening, Dave Hackstall and Seattle Kraken came to town for their first trip to South Philadelphia, and Welcome back, Dave. We gave Dave Hackstall a game that he should be very, very familiar with. We blew his doors off.
Oh, I'll say. A game he should be familiar with. A warm welcome to the Seattle Kraken as the newest team in the NHL. Here's a 6-1 decision.
Thumping. And up until that point, Seattle had played 1-goal games with teams that we expect to be decent this year. What's
really funny is I did an on-air spot. That was the only day I went on air this week because you know how this goes. It's early in the season. It's still very much. I mean, let's put it this way. If I without trying to get too much into everything else, because I know we are a Flyer podcast specifically, so we're not going to get into every other team in the city. But the Sixers started this week.
Things are busy in Sixer land.
And the Sixers have their own issues that are.
They just have the biggest story in basketball happening. So
right, that takes more precedence than anything on the court, to be honest. So you had that story. You had them actually playing games. It's whatever. It doesn't matter what the Eagles do. It's still football season, so football kind of still.
It's Philadelphia and the Eagles. We know how that goes.
Overshadows a lot of stuff. So to be honest, actually, I was a little surprised I even got asked on Monday. It was the only reason I can think of was it was not a post-Eagles day.
It's not a post-Eagles Monday. That's exactly it.
It wasn't in that case. But see, at the same time, like it would never shock me, like during the season, if like yesterday, they could have had I don't think they had their afternoon show. That's why. But if they would have asked me yesterday, hey, the Flyers are playing the Panthers. The Panthers are a 4-0 team, and the Flyers are 2-0-1. So it's very clearly like this could be another one of those testers.
Right.
Come on the air. So that was the only day I went on the air. And I turned around earlier that day and said, hey, listen, I don't know, obviously most people who I would be speaking to that would be listening probably don't know so much about the teams that come in. Right. So I'm trying to sit there and explain at that point, Seattle's been competitive. You're talking about a game that they were down 3-0 in that they rallied back and got tied before they lost it in regulation by a goal. Right. They win their first game in franchise history, and then they lose in overtime.
Yep.
They've played 3 really competitive games. It's a 1-1-1 team, and I would expect a competitive game. I don't know, at the end of the day, I think that we both were in agreement. We kind of hinted at this on previous shows. It's a game you probably should win still. We felt like on paper it was a game that should be won. But I wasn't sitting there, especially after looking at the way they played Vancouver, I wasn't sitting there looking at it going, well, here comes the blowout. Not a chance. Here comes the blowout.
I was thinking maybe like a 4-2 game, kind of what we ended up getting on Saturday.
Yes, exactly.
I certainly wasn't expecting a drubbing.
But it was the way that it was almost the way that it happened, because it wasn't even. This was almost the opposite of the 6-1 games that we would see when the Flyers were winning 6-1 2 years ago. Instead of it being worn down and late, here's the third period, now here comes the goals. Here comes 2 in short order. Here comes a third. Whatever, all that stuff. This was 3-0 out of the gate. To be honest, I was shocked that Grubauer came out for the second period.
Yeah, I don't know if Grubauer had gotten any rest yet, and I think they were just looking at it and going, all right, well, he's given up 3 in the first. There's a good opportunity to give him an early night.
Well, the issue that I had with that is they had another game the next day.
Oh.
And either you're going to do that right away or you're not going to do it at all. So as it really started to stretch on, I'm like, well, he's just in for the long haul. That's it. And then they pulled them at 5-0 in the second period. And I'm going, what are you doing?
Classic Dave.
Who admitted after the game, I should have done it a goal earlier.
Right. You either pull him early enough that he can start the next day for you, or you just leave him in there and risk yourself a Patrick Waugh situation.
So the interesting part about this game then, because again, it was an early scoring barrage with the 3 goals in the first period.
It's nice to see that.
But that wasn't the first 8 minutes of the game. It was really, they were on their heels for a lot of it. I mean, you had to get bailed out. And when you had the types of goals that we were talking about, and obviously we don't save the tabs from one week to the next.
Right.
But last week, did we not have a banner that pulled up that because we had to talk about it? Are people concerned about Carter Hart? And he made a save that changed that whole game. That's 1-0. It should be 1-0 Seattle.
Yeah, I want to bring up the Carter Hart conversation a little bit later on in the show after we talk about these games here, because he didn't play all 3 games this week. He did get a rest against Boston.
And
But Carter Hart had a pretty good week, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
And I want to talk about why he didn't play against Boston, because everybody was waiting for it, and it was very justified what was done.
Yeah, there's no need. There's no need to push him this early in the season.
Well, the same reason I'll explain something else too, because there's another reasoning that goes into Saturday as well. That I go, there's a reason something else happened this week.
Well, honestly, I don't know how much we have to go in depth to Monday. We kind of the Flyers just kind of beat a team that wasn't really on.
I do want to touch on a couple things from that game, though.
Okay. Yeah.
First of all, we have to talk about the save, because the save was I mean, that was. I don't even know where to start to rank it, because he's had a save like that in just about every year. He had the save there was a save against Vancouver as a rookie, where it was still his rookie year, I think, right? Where he dives across a crease and makes the save with the stick.
Yep.
There was a save on Taylor Hall 2 years ago.
Man, that might be my favorite still.
Actually, the same year, he made quite possibly a better one on Mikko Rantanen that doesn't even get talked about because they didn't win the game.
I remember the one. It was. Carter Hart has pulled out some spectacular moments year over year, for sure.
This was really, truly spectacular because of the fact that this is, I mean, I don't even know why it wasn't just a one-touch deal. I know what Jordan Eberle's trying to do.
Trying to settle it and make sure it goes in.
Settle it and then make sure it goes in, but he didn't. He settles it to his backhand, which you had every reason to just push it forward, and it probably could have crawled across the goal line.
We've seen that a thousand times where you're just batting at it and it trickles in.
Because it was exactly what it was. It was a backdoor play. It should have resulted in a goal, and he makes a save. And I think it got everybody up and everybody going all of a sudden, because how long did it take after he made the save? A minute?
Not long.
And then and look at what you get, by the way. A nice rush the other way. Here comes your captain. Big slap shot, one-timer in the net.
It's not too often you see a team band together and decide they're not losing a game that early in a game. But they made that. Carter Hart made that save, and you saw the rest of the team go, all right, we're rewarding him for that.
Right.
Let's go. And they played the rest of the period like the 1997 Detroit Red Wings. And I'm exaggerating. Like, you get what I'm saying.
No, but you got goals kind of in every sort of way. One-timer, rebound goal after a nice play, and the dirty but good kind where you go, hey, look, it's just throw it on net and see what happens, and something happens. And it was this is across the board. I mean, you got Drew and Konechny are your top line. They contribute right away. And then the second line's in on it because Brassard gets the goal, and that was not the first time they were in on it, because then they contribute later. And if you continue along with the process, like Justin Braun is in on basically a 2-on-0 with Travis Sanheim because of a nice play.
And just looks him off.
And scores there, too. So now it's 5-0, and Justin Braun has scored his first goal of the year in the second goal of the season. And you're like, just go home after that. Just go home. Like, it's over.
That game also included Derek Brassard's first as a Flyer and Ryan Ellis's first as a Flyer. Worth noting.
The Ellis goal was pure perfection. Board battle won. He calls for it loudly, by the way, because it was pretty audible.
You could hear it on TV.
You could hear it, and he's just there, and that pass is perfect. I mean, you have to love what a guy who makes $825,000 is giving you.
Derek Brassard has. It's a little bit of an understatement to say that Derek Brassard has earned his spot at this point. So Derek Brassard is obviously not going to surpass Kevin Hayes, and when Kevin Hayes is healthy, he's going to be the 2C. But he
might be, but here's the thing. How do you break them up right now?
Easy. You put Kevin Hayes in there, and Hayes, Farabee, Atkinson is going to be ridiculous. Ridiculous.
I don't know, though, because see, here's the thing. You can roll. I'm not saying I understand where you're coming from, but you could see. You know what you could do at the very least right now? If he was ready, and he's not, obviously. He can't be, because he's out for the first 10 games, which, by the way, if you're without somebody like that and you're 4 games in and you can sit there and say you're 2-1-1.
You're feeling pretty good about it.
You're doing all right. Something's working for you without him. But you can almost ease him back in that
and start him in sheltered minutes.
Like, why wouldn't you, if he were able to come back Wednesday. I had to, I wanted to say tomorrow, but let's be real.
You just pop Nate Thompson out and have him play Nate Thompson's 8 or 9 minutes a night, whatever it is.
I bumped Scott Lawton back down, and I say you go between JVR and Oscar Lindblom, and you still have a formidable line that has scoring potential at that point. You can't deny that. They haven't scored much, but you can't deny
they've been buzzing.
But add a player like Hayes, because Lawton's got the only goal on that line so far.
Okay, but watching Farabee and Atkinson.
You can't touch them. You gotta leave them out there at the same time.
I don't know, man. They're fun to watch when they have the puck, though.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You got to leave them on the line together because they're working so well together. I mean, we'll shift it to this later because we're going to go into the second game of the week where they were really the shining stars. I mean, when you don't need your top line, you don't need your top line to be at the best. And this is what I was trying to say all offseason was I'm not trying to downplay the importance of a guy like Claude Giroux, but you don't want him to be the go-to guy. You
don't want him to have to be.
Right. Now, if he's out there scoring 3 goals in 4 games to start his season, good for him.
Claude looks good. That power play slap shot is in mid-season form, I'll tell you that much.
It's harder than it was in the last couple of years. He's really firing with authority.
Well, he had a second kid now, so there's twice as much dad strength.
Fair enough, and Travis Konechny's got the dad strength too, so that's why he's looking vintage as well.
There it is. It's the dad line somehow with 22-year-old Travis Konechny, or however old Travis Konechny is at that point. He's probably 24.
24, 25-ish, yeah. Well, you're right, though, because then you're right. All 3 of them do possess
the dad line
strength.
There you go.
Because when did Couturier have?
Fairly recently. I do remember it happening.
Before last season, right? He was before
I think so.
Season. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of them now. I mean, you kind of can't deny it.
The team's just kind of growing up together, right?
Well, it's not just that. When you increase your average age over the offseason to like 28 or 29, I think you're going to have a few parents on the team.
When you sign a guy like Keith Yandle. I don't know, man. The average age of the team dropped pretty significantly when you let Brian Elliott walk away.
It did, but you brought it. You added Yandle, you added Atkinson, you added Brassard.
You swapped Voracek for Atkinson. They're about the same age.
Yeah, Brassard's older though.
Okay, that's fair.
Because Brassard's been around and he's in his mid-30s, and
he's played for 9 different teams, something like that.
I think there was a stat somewhere.
Almost all of them in the Metro.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I went back and I found a highlight from because just going through different games or whatever, and sometimes you rewatch something just on chance or whatever. He was playing for Pittsburgh 3 years ago, and doing well.
He was a big pickup for Pittsburgh. He was their big playoff pickup, wasn't he?
Yeah. What you're talking about? I guess in the year they would have been going for 3 in a row.
Yeah.
And they didn't win, but
right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But either way, Atkinson and Farabee, man, I'm a fan of that pairing. I'm a fan of those two playing together for the rest of all time, whether it be at 5-on-5 on the penalty kill like we saw in Saturday's game.
Well, I'm shifting over because here's the thing. First,
absolutely.
I'm talking the banner that's up on the screen previously is the only game that Atkinson didn't score a goal yet.
That's fair.
And now, granted, Farabee did not score on Saturday, but scoring was a lot harder to come by.
Yeah, but let's
be real. You can't go in and sit there and say, take away the 2 goals in the final 2 minutes of last Friday, and realistically, they were on their way to scoring 2 goals that game. And then they come out so they finish with 4 instead, and then they come out with 6 and 6.
The offense is back, apparently.
But that's not sustainable all year long.
Right.
You're not going to average 6 goals a game or 5 goals a game. It's just not sustainable. So when you do get, realistically, and I fully believe this, and I'm not trying to jump from the game we're putting on the screen to the next one, but they score 3 goals in the other game, they win. They probably win.
Almost definitely. Yep.
It was that was the kind of game it was. It was a very much a next goal wins kind of thing.
Yep.
And if they would have tied it, I don't know how. It probably would have gone to overtime. And
who knows at that point? You're rolling dice in 3-on-3 overtime.
Well, especially with that team because Florida's very transition heavy, They have a lot of their success in transition, and as a result, 3-on-3 favors them. But the Flyers have been good when it comes to if they can get and maintain possession in 3-on-3, they do well in that regard too. So there's kind of a couple things that go into your it could have worked either way. Really, it could have worked either way. But back to this one where they even have a name. They have a nickname too.
Yeah, and that one kind of goes away when you lose the Brassard element of things eventually. But right now, the Farabee, Atkinson, Brassard line, the FAB line. It's a very 80s line nickname, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess.
It feels very the French Connection, the FAB line. It's very old school nickname. You don't see line nicknames like this very often.
Well, you know what was like? I started to think about it as some of that game was going on because I'm sitting here going, they gotta have if they continue to produce at the level that they are, they've got to have something.
They got to pick up a nickname.
People start to combine it in some way, and one of the things that's a little bit of a challenge early on this season, from my vantage point, from even just I'm sure probably watching on TV a little bit too, is you got two really high number guys there. When you have
both up in the 80s.
And in the grand scheme, basically the 6 and the 9 on the end of the 80s is just reversed. You just flip it around and it's the same style. So when you look at that, you're like, it's almost like you almost have trouble about the only thing that works in your favor is that one of them's a lefty, one's a righty.
Okay. And the fact that Cam Atkinson is small.
Yeah, but there's a lot of guys on the team that make Farabee look small, so it's not like
that's fair.
Like Farabee's not big by any stretch. So
that's fair.
He's bigger than Atkinson. I get that, but there's nothing.
Everyone's bigger than Atkinson.
I know. Cam Atkinson makes me feel better.
He's a tiny man.
I see some of these other guys, and I go, okay, most of look. I never feel.
How many 12-year-olds are taller than Cam Atkinson at the carnival?
I don't know. See, I don't know if they're having the carnival. That's a good point.
Whenever the carnival returns, because I have faith that the Flyers Wives Carnival will return in some form or fashion at some point.
At some point. I don't know about this year. But
whenever it returns, well, Cam Atkinson's going to be here for a while, so he'll be here by the time it comes back.
Yeah, so 4 years left on your deal. Absolutely. I agree.
And I can't wait to see how many 12-year-olds take pictures where they're here and Cam Atkinson's about here. But all right, let's talk about this Boston game a little bit because it started with a Cam Atkinson goal.
Yes, it did.
And it was his first of the season, or his second of the season. But through the first two periods, it was a pretty tight game, right? It's 2-2 after 3, and that's a game where the third period is going to decide the game. And
it's
nice to see the third period start the way it did.
For sure, and it was also. If you couldn't go into this game without thinking about the team from last year. How about the way both of these teams were from last year? Because this was a nightmare situation for them a year ago. You played Boston, and basically, if you got locked into that type of game, you could be involved for 2 periods, but you were not the team that came out on top in the third period. And we
lost a lot to Boston last year.
Yeah. And to actually put it together, and they get that goal early in the third period, so now they're playing from in front. But you spent, how much? There was 8 minutes left, I think it was.
Yeah.
When Konechny scores, yes. So 8 minutes left, but you're at about 10 minutes left, and you're going, it can't still be 4-3 when it's.
It can't be a 1-goal game here.
It can't be,
Patrice Bergeron's here, Brad Marchand's here, David Pasternak's here. It can't just be a one-goal game.
And see, to this point, you're getting to that point in the game and you're going, for the most part, one mistake was the only reason that the top line for Boston's on the board. And you did not need to take an icing where you did late in a period.
Icing.
And it creates the mismatch because the fourth line was stuck, and here comes that line.
Here comes perfection.
And they come out and they win a battle. They get the puck where it needs to be. And
they lived up to their name. They executed a play perfectly.
And it's not your typical goal from it is, but it's not it's not a Pasternak sharp shooting type of goal. It's go to the net, get the rebound. It's kind of it's Brad.
It's a work goal. Yep.
It's Brad Marchand style. But for the most part, you had held them off the board. The second line gets a goal because of a bad line change. So within a matter of, I mean, that second goal for Boston actually came 8 minutes into the period, 8.5 minutes into the period. So you actually were playing with the 3-2 lead for most of the period. But you were getting down to the point, and it felt the same way on Saturday too. When you're playing with a lead as it gets to that stage, you're just talking yourself through, get out of this period. Just get to the break with the lead. Get to the break with the lead. Get to the break with the lead. And then see where it goes. And they didn't do that.
Brad Marchand scores with a minute left, 60 seconds on the clock in the second period. And that would have broken previous teams. There are Flyers teams that they would have come out in the third period, and a Bruin would have scored 58 seconds into the period. And two more would have scored a minute later, and it would have rolled downhill, and the Flyers would have lost 5-6, 7-3.
And like, it's a really tough kind of way to look at this game, because I almost think that they played better as a team against Florida than they did against Boston, because Boston had a lot of chances. You got a really solid performance from your goaltender, all things considered. I mean, there were a lot of people that didn't feel good about Martin Jones getting a start there. Martin Jones made 37 saves in that game.
Yeah, he looked really good.
Like, I'm sorry, when your goalie comes out of a game facing 40 shots and only gives up 3, and his save percentage as a result is, what was it, 925?
Right, and one of them is...
That's high-end level. That's league leader territory.
Right, and, you know, we've talked a little bit about goalie fault for goals this year, and, I mean, that's not really on Martin Jones. None of those goals,
nope.
You know...
Like, here's the funny part. Like, I saw some people who get kind of, like, sit there and go, well, it didn't even look like he tried to make a save on Taylor Hall's breakaway. And I say, like...
You don't know how hard that is. Come on.
Honestly, look, who's scoring the goal there, you know?
Right.
That wasn't...
A guy who's won the Hart Trophy within the last 5 years, like...
But that wasn't...
And is just good.
But that wasn't, with all due respect, that wasn't Carson Kuhlman coming down on a breakaway. That was Taylor Hall, elite shooter.
Yep. Right,
he knew where that was going before he got over the blue line, and
you maybe expect Carter Hart to make that save, and that might be kind of one of the level differences between Carter Hart and Martin Jones. But if Carter Hart lets that in, you're not upset about it.
Right, but I don't even know about that, because here's what you know what I really see from that, because people are going, like, people are reacting like, oh well, it feels like he barely made a move to even try to stop it. I think what he's trying to do there, realistically, is, you know what kind of player Taylor Hall is. Taylor Hall's got a mixed bag of, I can pull this move out on you at any time.
He's fancy,
and he's standing in there going, I'm just not going to bite first. I'm not going to make myself look silly.
Make him make the first move.
You got to make the first move, and when you make the first move, if you can pick your like, if your first move is just picking your spot, then pick your spot, and if it goes in, it goes in. I'm trying to make myself big. And
at a certain point, that's all you got to do.
The only thing that I can argue with is, yes, Jones does have a tendency to play back in his crease a little more than the average goalie. That's the only thing. Like, Carter Hart made a save on Saturday.
Oh my God, I know exactly the save you're talking about. I was just going to bring it up.
Now, the guy had his number twice that night, but Huberdeau from the slot, where he's really out challenging and gets the glove on it.
Dude, Carter Hart challenged. That was a penalty kill, right?
Yes.
On the penalty kill, Carter Hart was like a foot out of his crease, at a crowded slot. Like, it was. Oh, I loved that save. I loved that save.
But back to Jones for a second,
yeah.
Because I know there was a lot of people looking at it like, come on, it's Boston, so where's Carter Hart? Why aren't you playing Carter Hart? There's two things.
We want to hear Andy Brickley say, Carter Hart. Come on. Let us do the thing.
Come on. You know that's reserved for Hayes and Yandle now. And I add Yandle now because Yandle can do it just as well as Hayes probably can.
Does Cam Atkins get an honorary pass from his time at BC? Do they all get to do it?
I'm sure they do, but, like, I hear you. So let me get back into Jones for a second with this, because I know that there were people thinking like that. First of all, and it's been talked about a lot, and it should, and I feel like we almost are doing this. Everybody who's bringing it up, from my angle anyway, we're doing this from a place where we're almost sitting here going, these aren't yesterday's Florida Panthers. These aren't last decade's Florida Panthers.
It's hard to get over that.
Like I know what you're doing on the surface. You're going Boston Bruins, Florida Panthers. Who's the better team? Yes, it has always been Boston.
But this year, that's not the answer.
It very well may. Well, it could be. You don't know, but it very well may not be because of the fact that you sit there at the end of the day and go, it's not Tuukka Rask in goal anymore. It's not David Kraken in the second line. Do they have a good team? Yes, they do on paper. Absolutely.
But I do think it's as simple as once Tuukka Rask signs, if Tuukka Rask decides to come back and signs a minimum contract for Boston, blah, 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 I think they're right back there.
They could be.
Assuming Tuukka Rask is, what Tuukka Rask is.
Well, and sure, and then see this is what's encouraging to me too is they're not playing bad, are they?
No, absolutely not.
That
was a good little Bruins team.
That was only their second game of the year, so you definitely took advantage of some mistakes. But you're going, well, they won the first game of the year and they won it the way that they typically win games, and then they won their third game of the year. And they won it the way they typically win games. And yes, their third game of the year was against Buffalo, but Buffalo was off to a 3-0 start at that
Buffalo was undefeated at that point, right?
So you're going, hey, listen, that game was more competitive than it seemed for a little while.
Man, that Sabres team is an enigma. We might talk about them one day.
Well, here's the thing. I think a lot of teams are. I look at certain teams and I go, why is this team this? Why is this team where they are? There's stuff all over the place. It's not nothing in that standings picture is sustainable. Realistic.
No, absolutely not. Well, and it's 4 games into the season. If you're banking anything on the standings at this point, you're looking too early.
Well, and this is also what happens when you play everybody. The Flyers haven't played a divisional game yet. It feels like it.
It's nice to hear.
But it feels like it because they played Boston, and you kind of are making the association from last year. They played Boston. Well, they played Boston 8 times.
But they're only playing Boston 3 times this year.
Not only that, they're playing Boston all 3 times, by the middle of January.
Oh, is it early?
Yeah. They have another one with them relatively soon.
Yeah, the Flyers schedule is interesting because we didn't really go into this in our season breakdown. We talked about it a little bit, but they play a lot of teams. They get a lot of teams out of the way early, and they get a lot of their big road trips out of the way early.
They do.
The back half of the season, the Flyers really don't do a whole lot of multi-day traveling.
So there are 2 teams in particular. Let me check and see about the third one really quick here, okay, so not the third one. All right, so I won't jump into that one then. But they play Boston again on November 20th, and then close out the season series by January 13th.
That's weird.
And how about this then? So they don't play this team at all for the rest of the month. The rest of their month is Western Canada. But in November, they're going to play Tampa Bay on November 18th, then November 23rd, then December 5th, and it's over.
Wow. Those are going to be some nasty games, too. If there's any sort of dramatic activity in the first 2, that's a good time to get a little drama going.
But it's funny because if you go by early season results, for example, you play Chicago
Chicago's been good.
No, they've been awful.
Oh, have they been? I thought they've been good. Okay.
No, they've been awful.
Apparently, I'm not paying that much attention. They're the local market, and I don't even pay that much attention.
They've had some really awful games.
Oh, okay.
They don't play Chicago, though, until March 5th and then April 25th. So, there's your 2 meetings with Chicago. But can you imagine getting it? That's what the early season stuff starts to establish, kind of, as you go, if they're not a good team in March, you're going to get handed 2 potentially winnable games down the stretch in a playoff race, possibly.
Yep.
You think about that. You think about, okay, look at some of the other games that are in April. And I know I'm jumping way, way ahead, but, you're sitting here going, Buffalo's on the schedule twice in April. Ottawa's on the schedule. Anaheim's on the schedule. Columbus twice. Teams like that are on your schedule. Montreal's not off to a good start. They got Montreal in April.
Man, Montreal's off to an awful start.
Now, they finally had a game, but against Detroit. Now, kind of,
grain of salt.
Well, because, you still don't know. Detroit's been competitive in some of the other games. Now, that one they weren't. Why?
Right.
I mean, Columbus got off to a good start, too, but then they got crushed by Carolina.
So
Sounds about right, but then you go, they've won other games. So
I did also want to toss out a quick note while we're on the schedule here. That April 25th game in Chicago, I do intend on being there. So any YWT listeners.
Because you turned on, you said that the 2 easiest ones for you are St. Louis and Chicago. So
yep, about a month apart.
Yeah, any thoughts of the St. Louis game too?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I'm planning on it. It just makes sense. It's one of those things. I'm used to
gonna-
going to 5 or 6 games a year.
You're gonna have time off, right?
I'm gonna make sure I have those days off.
You're gonna need more than just those days for a couple of them.
Not really. I can get to St. Louis and back in a night
Yeah.
if I have to. They're about 2.5 hours from me. So if I really have to, all I need is that day and the next day off. So I'll make it work. Don't worry.
It's not all that different from if I ever march my way up to Allentown for a game. Yeah,
Exactly.
You're hauling it for a while.
Well, and when you're used to going to 5, 6, 7 games a year, and then all of a sudden you only have the opportunity to go to 2, you're going to those 2.
So let's talk about something that kind of I think ties into both games we've talked about so far too, because I do want to sit there and because you're talking about going to multiple games a year, and I've now been to 4 home games plus 3 preseason home games, so I've been back in the building 7 times.
Yeah, what's that experience been like for you?
Well, I don't even want, not even the experience. I more want to talk about the atmosphere, because you can sense that there's a feeling out process with this team, because there's definitely people out there that aren't convinced early, like going in, that change just means result.
Right.
Like I believe we've mentioned on here before the T-shirts that read something to prove, all the players wearing stuff like that. Well, there very much is a prove it mentality to the fan base. Like, okay, you did all this stuff, that's great, prove it. And very much so as I expected.
And I think that's warranted.
It's warranted, but very much so as I expected. Cam Atkinson has endeared himself to the fan base.
Phenomenal.
Right? Like, that's not a surprise. Are there still feelers out for other guys? Nate Thompson has his ups and downs.
We knew what we were getting with Nate Thompson.
Rasmus Ristolainen didn't play until Wednesday's game, so we'll kind of touch on him in a second, but it's still a process with him. Martin Jones is not going to be the most loved guy based on a couple of games.
He's also not going to be the most loved guy because of the guy that he's starting instead of. Like, if you're seeing Martin Jones, it means you're not seeing Carter Hart. So there's always going to be a little disappointment from the fans that they're not seeing Carter Hart. It's nothing against Martin Jones personally, just you're not the guy.
Agreed. But at the same time, like, so it's guys like that, and then you look at some of the other newcomers. Like, I think Yandle's done decent at building up, not his reputation, but like, you know what I mean. Like he did not have the best game against his former team,
but he's funny, so it doesn't matter.
No, but he had 2 really good games earlier in the week. So like, you kind of sit there, like, it's a give and take with him, and at the very least, like. I don't know how to describe him personally.
I liked what I saw out of Keith Yandle, especially against Boston.
Oh, for sure.
He looked really, really good against that Boston team. And when... So one thing that I said in the group text is I'm getting real tired of the post-penalty kill shift consisting of basically your 4th line and your bottom pair. I don't love the strategic decision out of AV to, all right, we just killed a penalty. Let's get some energy going by throwing Nate Thompson, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, and Justin Braun out there.
I have a theory to that, by the way.
Okay.
Because, are you saying that that's the first full line you see on the ice, or is that immediately after a penalty's killed?
It usually looks like when the penalty ends, the next group of guys on is that 4th line. Like, the next time they have a personnel...
Because my theory is that if it's Nate Thompson or Nick Aube-Kubel coming out of the penalty box and the other guy is possibly part of the penalty kill anyway, I think it just
they just throw the line out there.
I think it just bleeds over.
Maybe that's the case, but it seems like Nate Thompson is stuck on the ice for a minute and a half after every penalty kill, and it's driving me nuts. Just next time you watch, take a note of it.
Here's my thing with that, okay? This is, truthfully, it's exactly the way that he wants to run his lines, though. He wants it to continue to be a constant motion, and now you're picking up on that in a game where there was a parade to the penalty box.
There really was, you're right.
So, like, here's the difference. You're saying that then, you're saying, look for that next time I'm watching, right? There was no way to notice it on Wednesday. They took 1 penalty.
That is true.
So you stay out of the box. You never have to worry about who's the next guy out after the penalty kill's over.
You stay out of the box, and you just have fewer problems everywhere.
Well, exactly. But the point I'm making with that is that that's what makes you successful against a team like Boston. Boston has, no kidding, Boston has a power play. Everybody knows it. But you gave them 1 chance. They didn't score on it. You come away from that game with 1 for 1 on the penalty kill, and that's all that there is. I mean, I had somebody, and this doesn't tie in, by the way,
Okay.
to the penalty kill, but it's a special teams thing. So their first power play on Saturday was awful. They couldn't gain entry. It was awful, right? But I had somebody turn around and tweet at me after that, like after I said they couldn't even gain entry, blah, 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 go, what else is new? And I didn't even bother to entertain it with a response, but like the response would have been like, they were 2 for 2 in the last game, and so far in the season they're 3 for 7. So now they're 3 for 8. Like,
right. Well, I was gonna say Wednesday's a game that didn't have a whole lot of special teams, but Saturday definitely was. So we mentioned the parade to the penalty box earlier. We mentioned, man, Saturday was wild.
Yeah, I mean,
Saturday was a wild game from a penalty kill or from a special teams perspective. They gave up a power play goal. They scored their own power play goal. They scored a shorthanded goal. They gave up a shorthanded goal. Saturday's a weird one to evaluate because so little of the game was played at 5-on-5.
Yeah,
just kind of overall.
It's tough to evaluate. We already touched on the officiating situation that you lose one of your referees early. It was still first period that he realistically was gone.
Right, and I'm trying not to put any sort of blame on that and kind of just evaluate the game as it was.
No, all right, so let me go back. I'm kind of, again, we're bouncing around, but so let me go back to Martin Jones for 1 second from the previous game because I want to go into decisions because Ryan Ellis didn't play in Saturday's game, so it's about decisions early in the season. You can't just I understand what people were looking at. You're going Friday to Monday to Wednesday to Saturday. There's no reason why Carter Hart couldn't get all 4 games.
And that's fair, especially with 3 days off after Saturday until Wednesday.
I already knew the answer before Elaine Vigneault gave the answer, which is you're not going to wait 2.5 weeks and say the first time I'm putting Martin Jones in goal is in a back-to-back where I need him.
Right.
He's got to get work. You can't just sit there and say, hey, the guy played in 4 preseason games. That was really fortunate for us. He's sitting on the bench this whole time. He could be ready to go, but he played on October 8th, and the next time he's going to see the ice is October 27th or 20th. You can't make him wait 3 weeks.
No, like Carter Hart needed work. Carter Hart needed time. Martin Jones also needed a little bit of work, a little bit of time.
Look, there was a lot of benefits to me in that early part of the early stretch of the season because now you're going to get into it. Like the thought of, and I heard it this way, the thought of 3 and 4 coming up sounds daunting compared to what you just went through.
Yeah.
Because it's travel, it's not home anymore.
It's time zones, it's all sorts of...
And you might be playing 2 more teams again on this trip that you feel like you can compete with, but you're starting it with a team that's undefeated again.
And the Edmonton Oilers are a very good team right now.
And you can't play the game you played Saturday and expect to come out of it winning. You can't.
No. I don't even know if you can play the game Wednesday. You played Wednesday and expect to come out with a clean win.
You can to an extent because if you're that good,
if you're as good as you were in the third period.
Well, if you're that good, but if you're that good in counter rushes and transitions and taking advantage of the opportunities that present themselves, I mean, they don't have. They're basically down to 1 goalie. Remember that.
I don't know if I want to get into a shootout with a team that has Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on it.
No, but there's an element of support though that I'm seeing. Like there were shots that were leaving rebounds that you're going, that would be a dangerous thing. And before it gets to the stick of somebody else on the opposition, it's cleared out of the way a little bit. So there is a level of support there that's really good.
And you're hoping that continues, but man.
And for what it's worth, by the way, Florida ended up with 31 shots in that game on Saturday. Compared to 40, it's better. And actually, the better part of it to me was that the area where you really got outplayed, and again, I guess if you also look at the power play disparity, the area where you really got outplayed was they had 1 extra guy on the ice for a lot of time, and you actually didn't get outshot in the third period. You played better in the third period from a shots perspective than they did.
Right. Well, and especially once you're playing from behind, score effects kind of come into play a little bit.
Right.
And that's kind of how Boston ended up with 40 shots on Wednesday, is because they were down the whole third period. But
it wasn't, and that wasn't an indicator of how bad the game was, or whatever. In that way, just because they got outshot by 15 does not mean it was that bad of a game. They played better than the shot total indicated.
If Ryan Ellis had played Saturday, do you think that team gets by the Florida Panthers?
It's possible because you're adding an element there. Let's put it this way. I don't know. I'd have to get the full. Like, it's tough to put a guy like that in
Right.
over a Nick Seeler and then say, let's see what it would have been like. There's no way to know for sure and certain, but there's a difference.
Well, we wouldn't have had to see Nick Seeler, and that's good.
But there's a difference between an undefeated team with your best defensive core, and there's a difference between here's an undefeated team and you're down a top pairing guy.
Right.
And it makes a difference. Like the good news, believe it or not, the good news out of that was Justin Braun was the guy who filled in at the top, and he was not very noticeable, which is a good thing when we talk about defensemen. Like,
yeah, he played okay.
But I didn't see anything from him specifically that made me go, "Uh-oh." It's from because let's put it this way.
There was nothing super painful.
But also think about where he's playing. So they go 1 for 7 on the power play. Florida does. So Braun plays penalty kill. He's playing top minutes, which means you're out there with Barkov.
He's out there a lot.
And guys like because Huberdeau actually they balanced it out. Huberdeau usually is on the top line. We would think.
You would think.
But he's on the second line right now, and they've got a good top 6 because Bennett's been really good this year. Tippett's an up and comer, and then you throw in the fact that I wouldn't put, or in my mind anyway, I wouldn't put Carter Verhaeghe on a top line, but he's been really good this year, so he fits in with Barkov. He fits with the style.
He's not the biggest name, but I'm gonna mention a Florida Panther here who I really like, and I don't think gets the credit he deserves for what an electric player he is. Anthony Duclair.
No, he belongs on that top line. He almost scored 3 times last night.
Anthony Duclair is an electric hockey player, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves.
No, I agree. So you get back to this to the way the power play was. My thing was we just talked about Martin Jones in this way. You can't just play Carter Hart for the first 4 games because the schedule is favorable, and then say, okay, Martin Jones, come in and play your first game 3 weeks after you last played in a game. It's not going to work. You needed to get him a game somewhere this week. And if you actually were really going to consider who the better team was coming in.
Would Monday have been a better day?
No, because I think you wanted to go to Carter Hart on Monday because Friday wasn't the best. You
want to let him bounce back.
You needed him to get a bounce back, and you're looking at that team going, well, that's as good a team to try as any.
Dave Hackstall's coming into town. It's going to be a low offense night. Carter, get in there.
Well, because here's the thing, too. Think about it for a minute, because there were a lot of speculation about if Carter Hart didn't play the Boston game because it was a kind of a hint to going back to a year ago, and, well, this is a team that had his number before, so maybe they're doing the number. No, and it was valid to think that way, but reality is that, think about this. If he plays the game he did on Friday against Vancouver, and then comes out in the next game he's going to play is
against the Boston team,
and then Florida, does he even have a win yet?
Yeah, no, you toss him up a little bit of a softie. That makes sense. Give him Seattle.
And he very much is responsible for that game because of the fact that, yes, they score 6 goals, but it's
all on that save.
Right. And they
if he lets that go in, it's a 1-0 game, and who knows where we're at.
It's not even that save because he stops Donskoy on a breakaway. He stops Donato alone in front of the net. He stops Eberle from the side of the net there. He makes 3 saves that all could have been goals. It probably should have been 2-0 at minimum. And instead, it's still scoreless. And you go down and score the first goal. He was the one who won you that game with the way he played in the first 10 minutes.
Hockey's a momentum game. We talk about it all the time.
But then after that, now you give him Boston off because you need to get Jones.
You got to get Jones some time.
And he's got to play. Now, I saw somebody suggest to me on Twitter, so I assume the goalie rotation is going to be Jones, Hart, Hart. I actually think it's the other way around. I think Hart's playing Edmonton because you want your best guy in against a team like that, who you need somebody who can counter.
And you want to give him the extra day off between games.
And then Jones would probably get Vancouver, and then Hart gets Calgary.
I think you absolutely go Hart, Jones, Hart. Absolutely.
Because after that, they're back home. They're not back home again until a Tuesday. So they play Saturday, and they have, again, a 2-day gap. So you could very easily...
With travel.
And here's the thing. I might give Martin Jones that game. It's Arizona.
I don't hate it.
Because then you're setting the table for, okay, Pittsburgh, Washington on the road.
Time to go.
Go in, Carter. It's time.
Well, let's talk about Carter Hart a little bit on Saturday night. And honestly, I want to talk about both goalies because that game probably should have been 4-4 or 5-5 instead of 2-2 for as long as it was because both goalies were making some pretty spectacular saves. Sergei Bobrovsky quite frankly, looked great.
Yeah,
Most of the time.
Well, but that's the counter that you go into with it too, because we can sit there and talk about like Florida has really bought into the Joel Quenneville style. Like this is very much Joel Quenneville Chicago style here, and yet the thing that was different for them even a season ago was who was their goalie. Like you know what I mean? Like, and I don't.
And
say
now
that,
they have two.
Right, but I don't say that like I don't know who was their goalie.
We all know Sergei Bobrovsky has up years and Sergei Bobrovsky has down years.
Like where I'm going with that is that at different times last season, it was Bobrovsky was having a good enough stretch. It was his net.
Chris Drieger was there for a while.
Was there and comes in.
Spencer Knight comes in at the end.
But that was the point. They got to the playoffs, and toward the end of the playoffs, the best option they had was a young rookie goaltender who had barely been with the team because your $10 million guy isn't giving it to you in the playoffs.
Right, and that's the thing is you're not upset about the young kid coming in, and you're not even really upset about the lack of experience.
Right.
You're upset that he has to be your starter while you're paying Sergei Bobrovsky $10 million.
But now when your guy who makes that money is playing like it on top of...
Now you just have a great goalie duo.
Right, but it's also, look at what happens when all the other pieces click. Like, color me surprised that that's the first 2 goals of Jonathan Huberdeau's season.
Yeah, I noticed that too. When he scored the first one, Jim Jackson goes, "It's his first of the season," and I went, "Really?"
For a guy who comes in after 4 games on an undefeated team where everybody else is really contributing across the board, Bennett's given you goals. Duclair had a few. Barkov's involved. Verhaeghe's involved. Like, there's a number of guys who are scoring. You would have thought by then, oh, here's Huberdeau. Where's his? That's really his first goal, because he is a goal-scoring type.
Right. Like last season, he had, pulling it up here, 61 points in 55 games.
Right. Like,
including 20 goals in a 55-game season.
Right. A really talented player. So
right. He scored 30 at the NHL level before.
But that was it. So it's like, where was it early in the year? You know what I mean? Like, you got to factor that type of stuff in. But they held their own against a team like that really clicks on a lot of points. I mean, I think I just saw this morning from like one of the game sheets or whatever. Radko Gudas had 7 hits and 4 blocked shots in that game. Like, that's this type. He
was a monster.
That's the type of defensive game. Like you know who's not talked about that I haven't mentioned yet about this team that had an outstanding game last night? Aaron Ekblad.
I was gonna mention Aaron Ekblad. Yeah.
Like,
it was annoying how good he looked.
Right, but like
Aaron Ekblad looked like he was annoyed, or he was really trying to prove to Keith Yandle that he didn't need him.
I guess. Here's where I am at with this though. So like, you can't run Carter Hart into the ground 4 games in the season. There's got to be some balance.
I agree.
It's the 4th game. That's why Martin Jones gets a start. Carter Hart's now played 2 more games since what we talked about last Friday. He's looked good in both. He's got something to build on. In the same thing, because you asked me if Ryan Ellis plays, is it a different type of game, possibly whatever. The point of that statement, though, is that it's the 4th game of the season. If that's a playoff game, Ryan Ellis was playing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But it's not a playoff game. It's your 4th game of the season. You've got to manage this for the long haul. You don't want to play Edmonton without Ryan Ellis.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's transition to our looking ahead here.
Yes.
Because we talked about the goalie rotation a little bit, and I do think it's going to go Hart, Jones, Hart, especially because isn't Carter Hart from the Edmonton area? Isn't that where his family is likely to be? So I imagine he's probably going to get the start there.
It is. I mean, you could argue that...
I believe he lives there in the off-season.
He does. You could argue that Calgary's not that far of a trip either, but he probably should get both of those games.
Right, he's going to get those too. So
I mean, look, I'm not gonna bank on that yet. There's so here's the funny part about the goalie rotation for a minute too, because I forget when it was asked, but it was asked at some point. Maybe it was after they announced that Carter Hart was playing Monday. That is there a timeline in your head for when you want to get Martin Jones playing time? Because the way the schedule is, you could kind of get by with one goalie.
You could theoretically not, right?
For 5 games of the season, and then finally come in on game 6 and say, okay, now we have to play Martin Jones.
It's the second half of a back-to-back. Get in there, kid.
Right. But there was a lot of situations where you didn't have to use Martin Jones for a long time, possibly. And Alain Vigneault gave an answer with a smile that said, Oh, I know exactly when I'm playing it. And I knew exactly where it probably was because I'm like, it's going to be in the middle of this week. He's got a timeline in there. He's not playing all four.
It's going to be Wednesday. Yeah, and we knew that pretty quickly.
Now, granted, you could go off of the same mentality because you could sit there and say you put Hart in on Monday because you want him to get another game as quickly as possible after allowing 4 to start the year. But do you want to, now he had a really great game.
Do you want to leave him in there to let him build off that?
Do you want him to build on that? So,
well, the good news is we got the best of both worlds. He got the time off, he got the extra days, and then on Saturday he still came in and had a fantastic performance. Like the 3 goals he gave up, because there was an empty netter, the 3 goals he gave up were a power play goal from, again, Jonathan Huberdeau, a short-handed breakaway.
Well, here, and the thing about the short-handed goal, the thing about the last 2 in particular, while we're on the subject, here, there's a cross crease pass is tough enough for a goalie to stop anyway, no matter how it goes in. But there was no reason for that pass to get through.
None.
Travis Sanheim's got to be better there.
Yep.
I even complimented when I did takeaways. I even complimented Ristolainen on that because I go, Ristolainen at the very least has a positioning enough that the pass is coming. It's a defenseman, by the way. Mackenzie Weegar's got the puck. Weegar's got no choice but to either throw a weak backhander on goal where Hart's square
or get a pass off.
Yep. And it flutters. So it's not like, could Carter Hart technically get across that fast on a puck that's not moving that fast? Yeah, I guess he could. But there's no reason for that to get
You'd like to see a defensive stop there.
But even Sanheim's positioned fine. It's not his positioning. Just be a stronger defenseman.
I'll be honest. I was not supremely impressed with Travis Sanheim's performance on Saturday.
That's the hard part right now because in the early going, you're going to sit there and look, and you're going to wonder, is it Ristolainen? And the reality is I don't know.
It's Sanheim.
It's right now. It's been Sanheim. Sanheim has not had a good four games to start the season.
No, and
he is not.
I don't know if that pairing is going to work long term. I don't know if they cover each other's weaknesses well enough. I think you might have to see some adjustments on that.
I don't know if you can justify moving one of those 2 for what they make down to your third pairing, though. You can't put Sanheim with...
There's another direction to go.
Which is?
I mean, you split up your top pair, and this is something I've kind of talked about a little bit. And okay, so through 4 games, let's take a little bit of a look at Provorov Ellis, and we've only seen them for 3 games. I think they are a very good pairing. I am absolutely head over heels in love with Ryan Ellis in a Flyers jersey. It's probably the correct decision to keep them together. But if Sanheim Ristolainen proves to be I don't want to call them bad because they're not bad. Let's call them a little leaky. If they're as leaky as they've been, I wouldn't surprise me if Alain Vigneault tries it at some point. Split up, do Provorov Sanheim again or Provorov Ristolainen. Provorov Ristolainen and Ellis Sanheim could make a lot of sense to me.
I can't see them doing it. I just can't.
That's fair. And I agree, and it's probably the correct decision. But
those 2 at the top are your minutes eaters. Like, they're the guys you want on the ice for a majority of the game, and you know it.
Ivan Provorov's going to get his time.
Let me go into a totally different direction with this for a minute and go Keith Yandle, for example. You've got to know to an extent what you're going to get from him. He's just as much of a mixed bag as anybody else. Now, he comes out in the first 2 games first 3 games of the season and has 5 assists. So the production is high. Now, is it sustainable or from that standpoint?
Probably not.
Probably not. But it's no different than the Shane Gostisbehere equation. You've got to. It's a give and take in the sense that if he's producing a little bit in that regard, it's good.
You have to overlook some slip-ups in that case.
Right. Do you think for a second he's at fault for the final goal, for the shorthanded goal, because it's a bad pass, a lack of communication, and terrible puck management.
Awful.
That allows you to give up that breakaway. And the problem with that shift is he's not the fastest guy.
Right.
Yandle isn't.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you look at the other guys on the ice at that moment, power play's a minute old. They're tired. That's when they usually get off the ice. If you just get a clear, if it's just a clear there, it's a clear, and that's the end of the situation.
And that's
right?
fine, right?
Right.
You get a line change, you move on.
But it's not. So it's not only a clean breakaway, but Huberdeau was able to get his own rebound from behind the goal line and bank it in. Like, that's not on Carter Hart.
Absolutely not.
Who makes a save when you needed it.
He made the save, and no one was back there to clean up the mess, and there's nothing he can do.
I'm not trying to use this as an opportunity to bash a guy who's been really good to start the year, because Claude Giroux has been really good to start the year. But Claude Giroux on that play is on one knee watching it happen. Not, hey, I'm going to continue to back check to try to be there, like as if he's going to make the save. Like, almost an assumption that not only, like, either it's going to be a goal or Hart's going to make the save and he's going to be able to cover.
Right.
Like,
And either way, all he has to do is get back to the bench.
Right. And Yandle's too late coming back, so is Couturier, and, like, it can't. That goal should not happen
in the third period of a game that is, tied up to that point.
Where you have the
you just can't do it.
You've killed off 2 penalties to that point.
Yep. And you have your own power play.
Right. That have the crowd buzzing. Now you've drawn a penalty. So, like, finally you sit there and you go, there's the call. There's one that goes into their favor.
We needed this one bad. Let's go.
Like, at least turn it into some opportunities and maybe build the momentum going forward where you could be the better 5-on-5 team for the rest of regulation and maybe pull out a win here. And it just knocked all the air out of the balloon. That shorthanded goal does. But Yandle's that type of player. You're going to have give and take when it comes to Ristolainen as well. And I haven't seen enough in 2 games to determine whether he's completely the cause. Like, here was the thing for me, and I don't feel this from Sanheim as much. I have to go in and look. I didn't really reread his post-game comments just yet. But Ristolainen, after Wednesday's game, when he spoke to the media, was very hard on himself. Really sits there and goes in and takes accountability for, I didn't make the right play there. I didn't do this the right way. I didn't, I need to be better in that spot. I made a bad play. Well, at least you're owning up to it.
Right. You
don't have to own up to it. You could sit there and say, well, it's, that was what it was or whatever. Like, he owned up to it. And that at least, I didn't feel like he was the guy that really was a problem for most of the game.
No, I agree.
Like, I noticed Sanheim in that negative way more than I noticed Ristolainen so far.
I noticed Travis Sanheim in a bad way a lot on Saturday night. It was not... And talking of a guy who has a little bit of a Western Canada connection, Travis Sanheim played his hockey in the WHL, and I imagine he'll have friends and family at the Calgary game.
Right. Now, here's the thing. So here's the thing about this. Let's kind of go into the penalties for a minute from this, because there wasn't, when you take 7 penalties, you kind of almost sit there and go, come on, like, there's got to be a bad one in there somewhere. And look, I know that I saw people who chime in and go, well, this was a flop and that was a, like, whatever. I'm like,
Jim Jackson called something a flop on the air.
It had to be Nate Thompson's. Had to be Nate Thompson's roughing call, because
that was it.
Hornquist, like, listen.
He said something along the lines of, he's done this for a long time and he's flopped himself into another penalty or something along those lines. Like,
you can, with 7 minutes left in the game, or 10 minutes left in the game, it was 10 minutes left. You can at that spot, though, if you're Nate Thompson, you want to give him a shove and get him out of there, go ahead. But when you go 2 or 3 times, you've crossed the line.
They're going to call it.
Right, you've got to chill out.
And if he's not retaliating, you have to leave it. You have to.
It's like I saw comments coming going, oh, he's asking for a fight, then backs down and dives instead. I don't care that he dove after it. He's egging him on. That's what they do. Do not fall for that stuff.
That's his role. You think Tom Wilson's not going to do the same thing? You think Brad Marchand's not going to do the same thing? Like, that's what they're doing.
The rest of these penalties, Sanheim's interference was blatant.
Yep.
The Provorov tripping penalty at the end of the second period.
Bad.
You just gave up a goal. Now you're going to take a penalty. That's horrible.
Yep.
And it was obvious. Abe Kubel makes a nice play, gets a step, looks like he's going to create offense, and then 2 seconds later takes a penalty. I don't know how that guy is going to stay in the lineup when Patrick Brown's ready. I don't
either. I said it during this week.
He's playing himself out of a roster spot.
I don't remember which game I said it during. I think it might have been the Boston game. Man, Nicholas Aube-Kubel has been terrible. And I'm not a fan. We all know this. I've been pretty vocal about the fact that I'm not supremely happy that he's in your lineup.
Right.
But man, I look good. I look good in that opinion right about now, because he has been poor.
Yeah. It's not good. And
Yep. See, but overall, I feel like we're kind of complaining a lot over the back half of this show. I do want to express that I am pretty positive about this team. I think this overall was a very positive week. We talked last week about getting 4 or 5 points out of this week, and they got 4. I'm pretty happy with where the team's at right now. You know, Saturday wasn't perfect, but overall, I think things are moving in a pretty good direction.
Because you've got teachable moments from everything that's happened against you, realistically.
And you're still missing your second line center, and you were missing your top defenseman on Saturday night. Like,
right. You held your own against Florida without Ellis in the lineup.
Now, what's his status? Is he going to play in Western Canada?
That's what the expectation is. They keep.
Okay.
I mean,
he's traveling with the team.
2 days in a row. Well, I don't know when they're traveling yet, so they have a day off today. I think they practice in the area.
Probably travel tomorrow after practice.
Maybe
to start getting time adjusted.
I don't know. It's. You know what? I'm not really sure how it's going to work either because it is Canada. So
there might be some travel,
things. Like for example, here's an interesting little kind of caveat, if you will. So Patrick Braun finally gets into a practice on Friday, I think it was. He gets into a practice because it's the first time since he came out of he gets claimed off waivers. He goes into COVID protocol right away, got a test done, and he had COVID.
Right.
So
unfortunate timing.
Right. Everything was unfortunate timing about it, but. He spends the 10 days that he has to, so he's able to return. The issue is, by Canada's standards, he still has 4 more days left in that protocol, even though the rest of the league, he could have played last night if they really wanted him to.
Right.
Obviously, we understand why they didn't want him to.
Sure.
But he could have played. He actually can't travel with the team to Canada because he's still not through his timeline.
So he probably just won't go on the trip at all?
No, he's going to join them in progress.
Oh, he will? Okay.
Whether that is in time for Wednesday or not remains to be seen, but he is going to have to fly out at a different time because he's
got to wait out the days.
Right. It doesn't line up. That's the only reason. That's how. So you're absolutely right about that, in the sense that could they leave on Monday? It's possible because of the fact that you are going into a different country for the first time in, well, let's be real. For the first time since the bubble is really the first time you're going into this country.
Didn't the NHL crack down on when you're in Canada, you're basically not allowed to go anywhere except for the hotel and the arena?
Yeah, probably.
Because if that's the case, then they probably won't leave until Tuesday. Because why would you shackle the guys up for an extra day?
Well, that was my thinking.
You get into Canada Tuesday, you get there Tuesday night, go through all the blah blah blah. You're there Wednesday for the game.
They could do what they've done before with practices. By the way, you could have an 11 a.m. practice and then catch the plane right after, and then be like, okay, by the way, you're flying backwards kind of because you're going to a time zone that's behind you.
Right. It wouldn't surprise me if that's what they're doing on Tuesday.
Right. I think they're leaving Tuesday if I had to guess. Which it's why it made sense. I knew that today was going to end up being an off day because you had enough of a gap. You still have 2 more practice days at your disposal, and then you can have probably the optional morning skate. You're going to spend a lot of time on Thursday trying to rest up for another game. Friday you're off. It's actually a favorable travel schedule, if you will, by that logic. Then if you can't do much, because you don't just go from Edmonton to Calgary and then have another day in between where it's okay, Vancouver for a day. You're not going to practice on Friday because you just played 2 games in a row. So What do you do?
Chill.
If nothing else, what you're actually going to get is they should, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, look, I don't know. I'm not saying I know their itinerary when they go on the road, but if they do it the proper way,
they're going to stay in Vancouver Thursday night and then just kind of go to Calgary at their convenience on Friday.
Yes, I would say. Because
that should be the way it goes, and when there's not a time crunch, give your guys the time.
And then reality is that when that game ends on Saturday night, you probably fly home right away. And
so you probably jump on a plane and just get here.
Right. Yeah. Well, because of the fact that once you do get back here, you have the ability to jump right into go back to your there'll be some normalcy to, hey, you're home. go to
jump on a bus and go to Washington.
No practice. Well, no, they don't do that right away.
Oh,
no practice on Sunday probably as a result, and then Monday you start prepping for Arizona at home, and then yes, everything else is quick little trips to Pittsburgh and Washington, and again, the nice thing about it is that after they play those couple of games, you get a 3-day pause. When did we have 3-day pauses? A year ago, they didn't.
Earlier this year during last season, there were certainly no 3-day pauses.
I keep calling it last year because it's easy to identify.
Last season, I know. Yeah. But those are definitely games we're excited for. 3 games in Western Canada. I'm excited because I actually get to watch them because puck drop is late enough. I get done work at 8 o'clock, puck drop at 9. It's beautiful.
I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it's not nice to have a couple of games like this where, like, the lateness is a little rough for me, but the fact that it's an all-road week is kind of nice because when you've done 3 home games in the week and
you have personal things to take care of. You can't spend all night every night at the arena.
Well, it's not even. That's more what it is because of the fact, like, I love going, you know that, but like when you're there that often and it's the constant back and forth of it, it's.
You also have like adulting to do.
It's actually not that you have adulting to do. It's nice to actually be able to feel like you can sleep for a little bit. Like,
well, speaking of sleep, good luck going to bed at 1:30 in the morning.
It's not even going to be 1:30 in the morning for me because I got to write another article before the morning. Especially when you're talking about Wednesday night Edmonton that shifts over to Thursday night Vancouver that quickly. And how many things am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like, in between. Like, I have to update all the stuff for the preview, have to do a takeaways after that. Like, the in-game stuff is easy. I could do an in-game thing every other night of the week. Yeah. But every other night of the week, it doesn't bother me. Which by the way, let's have some fun with something really quick.
All right.
They did this just to mess with me, I think, because I have the graphics. I have graphics for everybody, right? So a couple guys made their debut on Wednesday against Boston.
Yeah.
So we're going to wear the road whites, right? And then the alternates came out on Saturday. Like, the graphics are based around the home uniform.
The home jersey, and they've only worn the home jersey twice.
Yeah, but who hasn't?
Right. Oh, all the people who played these last 2 games.
So Ristolainen. Like, Ristolainen will have played by the time. Like, here's the funny part. They have 3 games in a row now on the road. Then they come home, they play Arizona, then 2 more on the road. By the time they play their next home game wearing the home orange jersey,
theoretically,
it's going to possibly be the first time Kevin Hayes is in the lineup.
Wow. Because
that's how many games they play. Because guess what? Against Arizona, it's another alternate night.
Yep. All right.
So I have nothing for Ristolainen, which by that point he'll have played, 8 games as a Flyer? If he scores a goal, I'm done for. Like, truth be told, do you sit there and hold your breath? Seriously, do you sit there and hold your breath for, I don't have a graphic made yet for Zach McEwen?
No.
Like you kind of sit there and go, well, that's one that you kind of have to deal with. Like, and even like he's different, and Patrick Braun will be different because of the fact that they're almost like there was no preseason for them. Like, I would have loved if there was at least something for Ristolainen from the preseason that I could do, and maybe I'll try to dig and see if I can't find something good.
Yeah, I'm sure you can find something. All right, so
but you know what I mean. Like, I'm sitting here going, everybody else isn't like I got use out of those graphics on what day would it have been? Well, I guess Monday, because Ellis gets his first, Broussard gets his first. I've been using the Atkinson one like crazy.
Yeah, like crazy. Joel Farabee got some use on his, but that's an old one. You know?
Yeah, I mean, Drew's has been used 3 times as well. Who else am I thinking of that has a couple? Konechny's had a few. Konechny looks really good, by the way, early on.
Travis Konechny looks strong.
He had a little bit of a that grouping had. See, it's hard to categorize it as just a rough game because here's the thing: you end up as like Drew, Konechny, guys like that. You end up as a -3, but you're a -3 for what reasons? Shorthanded goal against, which did come off a turnover, but it's tough to be like the guy in Konechny's shoes where you're playing down low, so you have no shot to be involved in that play on a counter rush. You're just kind of along for the ride. He did turn the puck over from behind his own net with 3 deep on the goal, the rush the other way.
Right.
So that's a rough look in the final minute. And then one's off the empty netter. Like, rough way to be -3, but not one of their best nights. But hard to argue when they did play contain with Boston's top line as much as they did. Like, you went from Boston's top line to here's Alexander Barkov, have fun.
That's a tough couple of days, and it doesn't get much easier with Connor McDavid coming next. So
right, I mean, that's why I think the good news is that, like, I actually kind of like the fact that Vancouver's the game after, because you get a team that you've seen already, that you have something on.
Right, a little bit of familiarity with,
and more than that, like, what was the reason that you didn't beat Vancouver yet? Like, the reason you didn't beat Vancouver that first game was you made a lot of mistakes in your first game of the year that probably prevented you from doing so. Because if you were, I don't want to say down a goal, but, like, there was a way for you to have allowed 2, maybe 3 at most in that game, and instead you gave up 4 and then lost in a shootout as a result, and you had to play frantic comeback just to get something out of it. Like,
hopefully this team looks a little more composed this time around, and we get a little bit of a better...
Absolutely, but...
a little bit of a better 60-minute effort, not, the last 10.
Yeah.
But all right, and on that note, it's time to send the Flyers to Western Canada. So we got a couple of games this week that we'll be back next week to talk about, and you can find that show wherever you found this show. You can find it on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SportsTalkPhilly.com. Make sure to follow the show on Twitter at YWT Podcast and follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Make sure to follow at Sports Talk PHL and at Flyerdelphia for all your Flyers coverage as well. It's officially season time. You got to see those graphics that Kevin has made. And with that being said, I don't really think there's much more to do here. I think we're kicking them out to Western Canada, right?
Taking a day off first, though.
That's true. And after that, there won't be too many days off, and we'll be back next Sunday to talk about all of them. So
maybe a few. We'll see.
We'll not too many. And we'll be back next Sunday to talk about it. So until then, see ya.